Every 4 years, the World Cup descends on the planet like a weather event. Offices grind to a halt. Fully grown adults cry in public openly without apology. At one point, an entire nation once stopped functioning because a ball missed the goalpost by a few inches. And somewhere in the middle of all of this collective fever, there you are, completely unbothered, maybe slightly annoyed that your feed is full of jerseys. You've been told you're weird for this, perhaps cold. Maybe you've had someone look at you with genuine concern, as if your lack of interest in a football tournament is a medical symptom worth investigating. Here's the interesting thing: psychology actually points the other way. So, why do billions of people care so deeply about something they have absolutely zero control over? A game where strangers they have never met kick a ball on a pitch in a country they've probably never been to. And somehow, these fans feel like they won, or they lost themselves. We played terribly today. You were on your sofa. This is a psychological phenomenon called birging, basking in reflected glory, first studied by Robert Cialdini in 1976. He observed that university students were significantly more likely to wear their school's branded apparel the morning after their football team won than after they lost. They hadn't played, they hadn't coached, hadn't even watched in many cases. But proximity to the win felt like ownership of the win. The self, apparently, is a very opportunistic thing. What Cialdini was really documenting was how strongly people use group membership to manage their self-esteem. When the team wins, we won. When they lose, suddenly the language changes. They played poorly today. The ego quietly sidesteps the wreckage. This is not cynicism, by the way. It's simply how social identity works. Now here's where you come in, the person who watched the World Cup final last time and genuinely felt nothing. Because what sports fandom is really doing on a deeper level is providing scaffolding. The tribal instinct, the need to belong to something, that drive doesn't disappear in people who don't follow sports. You've just presumably built that scaffolding somewhere else, in a subculture, a creative community, a career you're strangely obsessed with, a friend group where you feel genuinely known rather than performing enthusiasm for a team you selected mostly because your dad liked them. The people who don't care about the World Cup aren't missing the human desire for belonging. They've just refused a specific vehicle for it, and frankly, the vehicle is a bit strange when you examine it. Let's actually sit with what's happening in the brain of a deeply invested fan during a tense match. The uncertainty of the outcome creates a sustained state of anticipation. The brain's reward system activates not only when something good happens, but in anticipation of whether it will. Neuroscientists call this unpredictability a core feature of behavioral compulsion, the same mechanism structurally that makes slot machines so difficult to walk away from. Intermittent reinforcement. You don't know if the next spin will bring a reward. Your brain remains engaged because the resolution keeps not arriving. Sports uses some of the same reward mechanisms that make gambling compelling. The space between expectation and outcome, the near miss, the stop page time goal that arrives just as you'd accepted the draw. For people who don't feel this pull, whose brains just don't hook onto the outcome of a match, this is not emotional flatness. The hook requires a prior attachment. Without identification with one of the teams, there is no stake. And without a stake, the uncertainty doesn't feel compelling. It feels like watching a coin flip for an hour and a half. There is also something worth naming about the social pressure around the World Cup specifically, as opposed to regular league football. Every 4 years, there's this cultural moment where even people who do not follow club football are expected to suddenly care because it is about nations. Now, it's not just a team, it's your country, your flag, your collective identity, made physical by 11 players you have never met. For some people, that framing works. The national dimension amplifies the attachment. It taps into something even bigger than team identity. For others, and this is where it becomes quite interesting, the national framing actually makes it feel stranger, not more meaningful. You didn't choose where you were born, you've had complicated feelings about your country for years, and now you're supposed to feel personally victorious because a man from that same country kicked a ball into a net. The emotional arithmetic does not land the same way. People who feel alienated from or indifferent to national identity find the World Cup's emotional logic the most alien part of the whole thing, which is not to say those people don't care about where they're from. They just have a messier relationship with it than a flag on a jersey can really hold. Studies on social identity consistently show that the intensity of how much you tie your self-concept to a group directly shapes how much a group's wins and losses actually mean to you. If the group never really grabbed you, the outcomes won't either. Where this tends to reframe everything a little uncomfortably for fans and non-fans alike. The version of sports fandom we are talking about, this deep emotional attachment to strangers performing athletically on a screen, is extraordinarily new in the span of human history. For most of our existence as a species, you could not follow a team. You could not even conceive of one, really. The parasocial attachment to people you have never met, feeling their wins as yours and their losses as a kind of personal grief. That's a product of mass media, television, global broadcast rights. It only became possible at scale sometime around the mid-20th century. Researchers like Horton and Wohl were already noting in the 1950s that television was creating completely new types of one-sided emotional relationship between audiences and strangers on screen, something that had no real historical precedent. So when people describe sports fandom as some ancient hardwired instinct, and yeah, the underlying tribalism is real. The particular version of it we're talking about, jerseys and face paint, and feeling personally bereaved when strangers lose a match you watched alone in your kitchen. That's a product of the 20th century, not prehistory. If you want to get weird about it, the person sitting completely unbothered through a World Cup final might actually be closer to how humans were built to respond. That is not a hot take. It's just a strange thing to sit with. The idea that non-fans are somehow missing a universal human experience when the experience has only existed since color television. And to be fair to fans, the research does support them. Highly identified supporters show real increases in self-esteem, lower loneliness, a sense of shared meaning that quietly functions like a social lifeline for many people. That should not to be completely dismissed. The distinction worth drawing, and this works in both directions, is identity that fits and identity that's borrowed because the room expects it. The fan who genuinely lights up when their country scores, who feels the loss the next day like a quiet hum in the background of everything, they're getting something real out of that. The person sitting next to them faking it, performing sadness they don't feel because opting out seems socially expensive. They're just exhausted. The psychology of not caring about the World Cup isn't, in the end, about being more or less self-aware than anyone else. It's just that certain collective experiences land and others don't. And you can't really manufacture the landing. Apathy is indifference toward everything. This is something more specific, a signal, really, that your attachment system has already found somewhere else to go. So your brain is not wired wrong, it is just elsewhere. And if you know exactly where, if you have a thing or people or a world you actually light up about, that is the whole point. That is what the fandom was always trying to do. One last thing, there's a reference list in the description of this video. Many people watching this kind of content are dealing with the same handful of things. Sleep that does not seem to restore anything, focus that keeps slipping, a brain that treats stillness like a threat. In this reference list, I hope you will find very useful information for yourself and take away a lot of valuable knowledge. I'll leave the link in the description. And if you want more deep dives like this, subscribe and hit the notification bell. See you then.